Hi everyone, my name is Shanthan Shabowski and I'm the Field CTO at Solace. I'm excited to show you the latest and greatest product enhancements and features related to the PubSub Plus Event Portal. So I've already logged in here at console.solace.cloud, and upon login you're going to see two new components added to this palette. The first component being discovery, which is the way that you can connect up to a Solace event broker and discover and understand the different event types and clients that are connected and what their subscriptions are so that you have a better understanding of what data is available. The second being Event API products, which is the latest and greatest way to expose high-value events to other consumers so that they can also take part in your event-driven architecture. For a long time, we've had the designer and the catalog components, and we're going to start there for our demonstration of Acme Rideshare. So if we click into the Designer tab, what's going on is we're loading up all the different application domains that exist within the Solace SE's account. There are a lot of them, so it takes a couple of seconds. The one that we're going to zero in on is the Acme Rideshare Solace application domain. And if we simply double click, we can see an overview of how this domain actually functions. We've all taken Uber or Lyft, and we all understand that passengers have an app and drivers have an app. But behind the scenes, there's systems like driver management system, a billing app that we use Chargeify for, and an expense reporting integration application. You could think of that as how your business would integrate with maybe Concur in order to provide you a seamless expense charging related capability. So as we can see here, we've got a lot of different events sort of down the middle, from rides being requested to the driver management system asking for what drivers are in that proximity and requesting those rides, the driver accepting, etc. And so ultimately, as your event-driven architecture within an application domain gets larger and larger, one of the capabilities you might want to be able to use is the ability to apply filters. So let's say that we're just interested in maybe the ride initiation flow. What events are related to just that flow? Well, you'll see that it's from the moment that the passenger requests a ride all the way to the ride finally being accepted from the driver management system and the passengers waiting for the ride to show up. This shows the capability that you can kind of slice and dice your event-driven architecture within the event portal in multiple dimensions. But let's dive in on, for instance, what does a passenger app look like? So if we double click on that, what we'll pull up here is the documentation related to the passenger application. So in this case, you can see that it was created by myself, last changed, creation time, last modified. We can see what type of application type it is. In this case, it's standard. We can see who the owner is, which in this case, I haven't assigned an owner yet because I wanted to be able to show you how easy that is to do. So in this case, for instance, you just click on edit. We can add or remove owners. Any owner that's within this organization is eligible. So in this case, we're going to have Robert Otteson, who's one of our SEs, be the owner of this application. And we'll click Save. Now, in addition, if we go back to that passenger application, one of the things that's really important is the ability to provide rich descriptions around event applications in the schemas. And in this case, what we're really exposing is, hey, the passenger app has a riders API. Here's how you ultimately get started. How do we deal with pagination, common types, all of these kinds of things. But down at the bottom is a really important area, which is really defining the publish and subscribe interface for this application. So in this case, this application is actually subscribing to two events, the billing receipt created and the ride accepted. And for each of these events, you're able to understand the topic address which it's consuming. Conversely, it's also publishing an event, which is a ride requested event. So, when you're sitting on the side of a street wanting a ride, this is ultimately the event that gets published, and it gets published onto this topic address. And the topic address is basically made up of literal values with delimiters of forward slashes using Solace rules, but then can also comprise of parameters. And parameters can be enumerations like regions, which we'll talk about in a second, or device IDs and ride IDs, which are ultimately just variables. So if we go back to the Acme Rideshare application domain, we can further understand maybe what does a ride requested event look like. So we've looked at an application. Here's what an event looks like. So it has a topic address. It's a part of a logical event mesh, which in this case is called Acme Rideshare Demo, which again is a Solace logical event mesh. And in this case, we also have an additional piece of data, which is very important, which is the schema of which represents the payload of the data. In this case, the ride requested V2 schema. So we can click on that. We can understand, really what does the content look like? Okay, there's customer ID and ride request ID. These are strings, start latitudes and start longitudes, which are numbers, in latitude, in longitude. And we can also see for a given schema, what events actually also use this. So there's actually two different events that transport data related to ride requests. One is the business moment in which a ride was requested from a passenger. But in addition, when the driver management system ultimately sends out an all call for drivers that are wanting the ride, it also uses the same schema. It just represents a different business moment. In addition, you can have tags, you can specify schemas of different content types. In this case, it's JSON schema, but we support XML schema as well as Avro in order to represent what your payload ultimately looks like. Finally, the last thing that we can look at is sort of understanding sort of flow. So in this case, you can see here when I click on one of these lines, it highlights the overall path that this event is taking. That's really important to sort of give you guidance as to, hey, for a given event, what are all the different event flows that relate to a given event? So if we go into schemas, this is the list of different schemas related to the Acme Rideshare application domain. As you can see, some of them are shared, and what shared really means is the ability for events and schemas to be shared across application domain boundaries. In some cases, maybe you don't want to expose events for the overall organization to be able to find it within the catalog and ultimately bind to in order to maintain agility. But for high-value business events, our suggestion is to try to expose those so that other people within, other teams, other parts of the organizations, and specifically what we would call other application domains within the event portal can ultimately find them and easily integrate with them. And so again, if we look at a driver status schema, then again, it's very similar layout as to what kind of metadata is available, but instead of looking at it as to, what are the applications that maybe produce or consume this event? Now we're looking at it the inverse of, hey, this schema is actually, being used by, for instance, the driver status updated event. And what's really important is to have a system that keeps track of these relationships from the payload schema to the event to the publishing and subscribing applications. The next really important part of the event portal to touch on is the catalog. And the catalog provides you the ability to do rich search, whether you're searching on the events, the schemas, or the applications. So for instance, in our events, what if we were just to ask the question of what data do we have relates to PCI and PCI compliance? So for instance, we can search, and what we'll find is whether it's in the description, so in this other domain of open banking, where we matched a PCI field within the description. But in the case of our Acme Rideshare case, we actually matched that there's a tag applied to this saying that there's a PCI compliance concern if you're using the driver funds deposited or the billing receipt created events. This is very important in order to provide the right information to the right user at the right time for them to ultimately find the information that they're looking for. Another case that can be interesting is, maybe you're interested in specific data fields, and maybe you're interested in data that has, geo-coordinate kind of data, so latitude and longitude. So if we type, for instance, lat into our search criteria here in schemas, what we're going to be able to find is any data here that has latitude, the keyword lat in it. You can further refine that to be latitude. and that'll further refine our search results down just into the grouping that we want. But if we're really just looking for the Acme Rideshare Solace events that contain, or schemas that contain latitude, you can further refine your search based on the application domain, or whether it's an enterprise shared event, or even who the owner of that event ultimately is. So in this case, what we're able to find is ride requests and trip status have latitude in the content of the actual schema. So in this case, end latitude and start latitude. So again, this shows the overall rich context of, if you're interested in geolocated related data, maybe you're interested in actually trip status, you can now click on trip status, ultimately find the events that reference this schema, trip updated, understand the description, and decide whether that's the business moment of which ultimately solves your use case or not. So you might be wondering, though, ultimately, how did all of the data in Designer and Catalog get there in the first place? Do you have to type all of this information in from scratch, or is there some tooling that can ultimately help both provide a better user experience of getting data into the event portal and ensuring that the data that you do get into the event portal is consistent with ultimately what has happened in the runtime? And for that, we have the discovery capability. So in this case, I want to bring your attention to the Solace Acme Rideshare, which is a discovery session that I actually did some time ago. You might also be asking, well, how do I run a discovery scan? Well, it's actually pretty simple. You can essentially, whether it's Mac and Linux or Windows, you can download our discovery agent, which is actually a Docker container. From there, you pull up the discovery agent console by, once it's running, by going to this link. And then that's where you actually configure the scan to point against your specific event broker, what your credentials are to get access to the event broker, and ultimately things like discovery scan durations that control how long are you listening to sample, what are the events being published, as an example. Once you've completed that, you upload your discovery scan to this page by clicking Add Discovery, choosing the file that you're interested in, and then it's available here. So instead of going through all of that, I've actually already uploaded it and imported it into Designer. But I wanted to show you how easy it can be in order to do this. So when you come in, what you're going to find is it's going to show you at the very top, how many topics overall did it find, and how many queues or direct clients did it find, which in the event portal we would call client delivery endpoints. In addition, down here, you've got sort of a running status of, how far are you to completing and kind of getting, defining, the topic to event mappings and the queues and direct client mappings to actual applications. So in this case, we've already done all the work, but I can kind of show you what we did. So if you click down, here's the overall topic, topic scheme that we were able to discover. So in this case, Acme Rideshare billing receipt created, the version of that. And then if you notice here, this previously would have said US. And what I was able to do is actually say that, no. We don't want to catalog every one of these individually. Region is actually a parameter that's being passed in runtime, which can actually have multiple different types. So if we click on edit, you can see here that I've created an Acme Rideshare regions enumeration. And it's really the regions where our Acme company has customers, which are the United States, the UK, Canada, and Mexico. And so really, that's kind of the job that you have to do when using this tool, is ultimately look at these different topic structures, decide what are literal values like Acme Rideshare billing receipt created are all literal values, but then what are the values that maybe are variables and runtime? Can they be represented by enumerations, or are they actually what we would sort of say is just undefined variables like ride ID? And so you kind of go through all of these, ultimately, creating your different event types and adding them to the application domain that you want, which again, in this case is Acme Rideshare Solace. In addition, on the queues and direct clients, what we basically found are a whole bunch of direct client endpoints. And each of these direct client endpoints has a given subscription. And so what we were able to do is map, based off the name and the subscription, these to the actual underlying application so that ultimately their subscription interface is basically automatically discovered based off of the event types. So once you've done all of that work, you can return to Designer and ultimately do the last couple of steps, which is really the one thing that we're unable to discover due to the decoupled nature of EDA is who actually published these events. And so really the last step is that you would go and say, okay, the driver management system, for instance, has a subscription to ride requested, but who actually would request a ride? Well, of course, we know as domain experts that the passenger app would actually do that. So you would just simply go in, manage events, and you would define, based off of the different events that are in the system, what events are actually being published by this given application. One last thing I just wanted to touch on, and in fact, we're going to show you right here, is the ability to add a new application that consumes a lot of data very easily. So what we'll do is we'll create an application, and we'll call that US Analytics. This application is consuming data about US rides. So it's a standard application. It's not a Kafka connector. We can again add owners. In this case, I'll add myself. We can add tags. In this case, maybe we could say it's analytics. And ultimately, as an analytics application, we need to consume some events. And so ultimately, what you can do is twofold. You can go and manage these events, and you can actually sort of pick out the events that you're interested in. So maybe we want to subscribe to, the business moment where rides are, a ride is actually accepted versus the moment in which the driver has accepted. And maybe we want to just try to calculate the delta between the times where the driver's actually accepted the ride. And let's add one more where the driver ride requested has happened. So let's say we want to do analytics on how long is it taking our drivers ultimately to, from the moment that a ride has been requested for them to accept it, and that accept to go all the way back to the passenger, because we do care about our customers' experience, right? So what we're able to do is map that, hey, these are the event types that I notionally want to consume in my analytics app, and I can click save. So now the US Analytics application shows up on our canvas, but we're not quite done yet. One of the things that we need to do is we need to define the actual client delivery endpoint that application is going to consume on. So in order to do that, we can go to Client Delivery Endpoints, create a Client Delivery Endpoint, call it the US Analytics queue, and then you can pick what logical event mesh. So in this case, we're going to do the Acme Rideshare demo. What is the type? Do you want an event queue, meaning it's got durable guaranteed messages? Do we want to use JMS and maybe we want the durable topic endpoint type, or is it just a direct client endpoint best effort? So we'll say it's an event queue, define a username, and we'll add subscriptions. Now, what's really exciting about this tool is you can either add subscriptions manually, which I'll just show you briefly, where you can go, hey, maybe I want, which would be exciting, is, hey, just give me everything. What are all of the events that exist? I can use the wild grant, the greater than symbol in order to do that. The other way to do this, though, if you don't want to do this manually, is actually add subscriptions by the events that we've already said. So we kind of almost have this in our shopping cart of, we already said these are the event types that we want, but we have to provide further specificity on the subscription that we would want for each. So in this case, driver ride accepted. We could choose, do we want all device IDs and ride IDs? But specifically, remember, we're doing US-based analytics, so we want to filter our region to just the United States of America, right? And we can add that as a subscription. And we're going to do that for each one. Everywhere we see region, we're going to actually sub-select our data down into just the data that we really want, which really exposes an important value proposition of Solace and our event broker, and the ability to really filter data to just what you're wanting versus consuming an entire topic of data and throwing it away. So from here, we've now defined that, hey, our event queue is going to have these 3 subscriptions, and now we can add the subscriptions. So as you can see, we now have 3 subscriptions on the US Analytics queue, which are represented by these subscription lines. And ultimately now we have a full-fledged application that's ready to consume just US-based data. What I wanted to show you was, not everything is as easy as we're sort of showing. Things change over time, and we're going to be providing enhanced capabilities for version management. But right now, as we speak, let's say you've got a driver management system application, and maybe you want to see the revision history. Well, we're keeping track of every time you change any piece of metadata related to, to the event portal. We're keeping track of exactly what's been going on. You can, go and look at previous versions of this and really understand who changed it and ultimately what they changed, which is a very valuable capability of our tooling. I just wanted to showcase to you briefly was Event API products. So down here in this tab, which is in beta currently, you have the capability to define Event API products. So in this case, I've already predefined a Acme Rideshare driver event API and an Acme Rideshare rider event API. And obviously, depending on whether you're the rider or the driver, you would want to expose different information. And so for instance, the rider event API has exposed that if you wanted to use this capability, that you could subscribe to ride accepted events, you could publish ride requested events, and you could both publish and subscribe to trip updated events. So for instance, you could cancel a trip, but you could also see that the trip has begun or that a passenger has been dropped off. To do this is very, very simple. You simply click Edit, you choose the different events that have been exposed as Event API products. For each one, you select that you want it to be added, let's say, and then you select the operation of which you want to expose to others. In this case, I'm pretty happy with this. And in fact, we've already released this. So it's active. You can actually integrate with this Event API via our REST API, as well as actually we have a public hosted async API document that you can actually fully understand and expose to others. So in this case, we've exposed 3 async API channels related to our events. We've provided the server connectivity details, the schemas. Everything is sort of self-contained so that, you as an end user or a developer could ultimately look at this, decide if one or more of these channels or event types are of interest to your use case, download the actual async API file, and ultimately, run it through code generators and get started. So that's really Event API products, which is really the ability to, like I said, compose groupings of events that provide bigger and larger organizational value than the events by themselves. The last thing I just wanted to also expose as part of our demo is the capability to if you're the developer now tasked to go and help build this event-driven architecture within Acme Rideshare, let's say that you're going to build out the driver management system, you can simply download the async API document that represents just this application. Again, run it through a code generator, and essentially have especially the Spring Cloud Streams code generator, and really have a skeleton already built up, with that exact matching interface, the POJOs that represent the data types, sort of everything pre-curated so that it makes development much, much easier. So I hope you learned a little bit about where we've taken the Solace PubSub Plus Event Portal. I encourage you all to go ahead and do a discovery scan of your existing Solace estate, bring it in, get it into the designer, extend your event-driven architecture, build new applications, and finally, create those Event API products that expose the value of event-driven. We've been doing this for a long time with API management, and you've seen sort of how prolific the adoption of REST has become. I think the same thing will happen here through the event portal with the Solace PubSub Plus Event Portal, because now there's a way to fully understand what rich real-time data is available within the EDA platform that you've chosen. So thanks a lot for your time. I hope you found this demonstration to be valuable, and I look forward to having discussions with you each in the future. Thank you very much.